Tonight, new hopes that President-elect Trump will be able to restore relations with Russia. Mr. Trump and Vladimir Putin exchanging end-of-the-year greetings. We'll have the details next. Also, the terror manhunt is over, but questions remain over how the Islamic State attacker eluded capture for 4 days. We'll have a full report from Berlin. And a stunning move by the Obama administration, allowing the UN to adopt a resolution condemning Israeli settlement construction. Mr. Obama's defiance coming despite tremendous pressure by both President-elect Trump and Israel. The Weekly Standard's Fred Barnes weighs in moments. And good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Sullivan in for Lou Dobbs tonight. We begin with the deadly terror attack in Berlin. Anis Amri was considered one of the most wanted men in Europe, but tonight, authorities got their man. President-elect Trump late today reacting to the attack, tweeting, "The terrorist who killed so many people in Germany just said before crime, 'By God's will, we will slaughter you pigs. I swear we will slaughter you.' This is a purely religious threat which turned into reality. Such hatred. When will the U.S. and all countries fight back?" The latest now from Greg Paulcott in Berlin.
Gunned down and killed on a street in a suburb of the Italian city of Milan, the man thought responsible for the deadly truck attack in Berlin, Germany, Monday night. 24-year-old Tunisian man Anis Amri, seen in a video posted by ISIS just hours after his death, pledging allegiance to the terror group, somehow made his way from Berlin to southeast France and then by train to Turin and Milan, Italy, a trip of some 600 miles. All the while, he was the most wanted man in Europe. In fact, he was only caught by a routine Italian police street patrol. When he was asked for identity papers, he refused and shot the police, injuring one. They fired back with deadly aim.
The police reacted, and the person who attacked our officers was killed.
The Milan shootout triggered an instant firestorm of recriminations in Berlin. Despite police surveillance and tightened borders, how he could have moved around so easily, and how he was able to stay in Germany for 18 months before the attack while under suspicion. And did he act alone?
It is very important to determine whether there was a network of helpers, a network of supporters in planning and executing this deed, and the suspect's escape.
Also very much still under fire, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, as more reports indicate that Amri could have taken advantage of the huge influx of refugees to Germany in 2015. And with the immigration system swamped, he was able to act at will.
We can be relieved at the end of this week that one acute threat has ended, but the general threat of terrorism continues.
Relief and fear echoed on the streets of Berlin today.
He can be there, or there, and now...
Now he's caught. Now he's dead.
Yeah.
It's a relief because there's no more danger, but I don't think it stops there.
In fact, German officials say tonight they remain on high alert, and the investigation into the truck attack here remains open. There are too many unanswered questions and outstanding threats for this to be a completely restful holiday period. Tom.
Greg Paulcott in Berlin. Thank you, Greg. Meantime, President-elect Donald Trump today releasing a holiday letter that he received from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin writes, and I quote, "I hope we will be able, by acting in a constructive and pragmatic manner, to take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as being our level of cooperation in the collaboration, I should say, on the international scene to a qualitative new level." Well, Trump responded with this statement about Vladimir Putin. He says, "His thoughts are so correct. I hope both sides are able to live up to these thoughts and we do not have to travel an alternative path." And during a news conference earlier today, Putin said he would be willing to visit the United States if President-elect Donald Trump sent him an invitation. So joining us now, the founder and the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, and Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's President Clifford May. Dr. Zasser, let me start with you. This business about in Germany, at first I was aghast because I heard about how the police had him on their radar and they were following him and he had a criminal record. And I thought, well, what was wrong with the police? But with 1 million immigrants into Germany, I'm thinking, no, I don't care how good the German police are or are not, there's no way they could follow how many people are somebody that they should be keeping tabs on.
But, Tom, there's something we can learn from every one of these, and this one is a known wolf. It's not somebody who could get lost in a million people. He came in through not only the last trek that he did down to Italy, which doesn't make any sense, but in the last 5 years, he came in through Tunisia to Italy, was in prison for 4 years because of violence at a migrant center. Then Italy said, we don't want you, get out of the country. They deported him to where? We don't know. Just leave the country. He then makes his way up to Germany, lives there, has interactions with the law 4 times, a knife on a bus, a drug arrest, was actually under surveillance because his roommate was related to ISIS and was arrested. But this guy went off surveillance in September. So he's a known wolf. He's not an unknown person. And yet they dropped the ball. So the EU, Germany has a major problem in communication between intelligence apparatus and the following of the ideas that they should be following.
I agree with you that they should have been all over this guy, but I just, my point is that there's so many people that they should be watching because so many people have come in. Cliff, the other problem here obviously is, I mean, I go back a few years now, but when I was a younger man, they would travel Europe. You had to stop at every border and show your passport and go through the whole drill. Now, take your pick. Travel wherever you want, obviously.
Right. And the idea of having open borders in Europe was not meant for a time when you have millions of migrants, as well as terrorists who are trying to get in and trying to get around in these various countries. That's a real problem, as is the possibility of trying to integrate and assimilate all the migrants, or if you want to call them that, all the refugees who are coming. Too often they are ending up in what you might call ghettos, some might call colonies, and those become recruiting grounds. Those become places where these kinds of people can find their way in, and it's very difficult for the police to track them in there, and very difficult to find people who will tell on them. Some do, but others don't.
Back to you, Dr. Zasser. This whole business about Europe being more open and being more socialist than we are, although we keep moving more toward a European model, how likely is it that we are going to see the same problems Europe has when it comes to this influx of terrorists?
Well, our trajectory isn't as quick as theirs, but we're headed in the same place if we don't start to focus on the ideology. Terrorism is a symptom. The ideology is this collectivist mindset that they have allegiance to the global jihad. The mantra, I hope, for the Trump administration will be, it's the global jihad, stupid. And the lack of borders, the lack of a secular state identity is the fact that then feeds this collectivist global Islamist mindset. The only antidote, and I'll tell you as a Muslim, the only thing that didn't make me get radicalized was my American nationalism, my belief that this Constitution protects me from the Sharia state. That's the way to assimilate Muslims in Europe, is to bring back their nation-state identities, but to wed it to a belief in freedom and liberty for their immigrants and also for their the indigenous people of Europe.
So here we are on the cusp of the holiday weekend, and Cliff, you've seen the reports that ISIS is saying they're calling for aspirational attacks on during the holidays, and with Hanukkah and Christmas lining up together. Are you on pins and needles about this?
I'm not on pins and needles. I think there are a lot of people in intelligence and law enforcement who are and who ought to be, because we've had the attack in Germany. We had almost an attack. It was stopped in Australia. But in both these cases, and we're likely to see others as well, you're talking about attacks on Christians during Christmas time while they're celebrating in Christian majority countries. It's not just that they're doing this in the Middle East, where, of course, a Coptic Christian church was recently bombed, 24 people killed. This is an attack, exactly what Zuhdi is saying. It's an attack by those people who identify themselves as jihadists, who see themselves as internationalists, and don't have an identity of a particular country and respect those who have other identities, whether they be religious, ethnic, or nationalist.
Dr. Jasser, this letter back and forth, the holiday greetings between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, a lot of people are making a lot of it. Are you concerned about it, or are you hopeful about it?
Well, I'll tell you, the formalities sort of in the courtship period before President Trump fills the White House is, I don't know what to make of it. I do think that once President Trump's in the White House, we may share some common enemies. But I hope then, I'll tell you, as a Syrian American, Moscow doesn't really share our values. Their relationship with Iran is problematic. The genocide committed by Assad is problematic. So maybe we may work with them to get rid of ISIS, but ultimately I hope we can get some leverage in a positive strength way to end what the Assad regime is doing to the people of Syria.
Cliff May, what's your reaction?
President George W. Bush looked into Putin's eyes and thought he saw someone who is straightforward and trustworthy. Turned out to be incorrect. President Obama thought that relations with Russia were bad thanks to Bush, and that a simple toy and a button you push that would solve everything. With a reset, that didn't happen. I hope that Trump will have a very realistic attitude towards Putin, who right now has allied himself with the world's greatest sponsor of terrorism, according to our U.S. government, and that's Iran, also helping Hezbollah. And the devastation we've seen in Aleppo is largely due to Russia, as well as Iran, as well as the Hezbollah. So one thing I do hope is that he can drive a harder bargain with Putin than we've been able to do during the past 8 years.
Well, that's his claim. He's a hard bargain driver. Let me put it that way. Zuhdi Jasser, Cliff May, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for coming on. Good to see you.
Tom.
Well, we're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. The incoming White House press secretary says President Trump will always put America's safety first.
Countries need to know that under a Donald Trump presidency, business as usual is over. He's going to act. He's going to protect America. And if they increase their nuclear capability, America will act.
Fred Barnes joins me here next. Vice President Biden bluntly explains why Clinton's presidential bid failed. We'll talk about his harsh criticism of the left's losing presidential nominee up next. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, the Obama administration today allowing the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlements. President Obama breaking with a long-standing U.S. tradition of vetoing such Security Council resolutions. Instead, today, simply, we abstained from today's vote. After the vote, President-elect Donald Trump said the U.S.'s policies regarding Israel will soon change, tweeting, and I quote, "As to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. Fox News correspondent Kevin Corke is traveling with President Obama in Hawaii, and he has our report.
Tom, good evening. The president made this decision after several rounds of conversations with many members of his inner circle. We're talking about key members like Vice President Joe Biden, Secretary of State John Kerry, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and UN Ambassador Samantha Power. Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes told reporters today the abstention vote was preferred because the UN, frankly, hasn't exactly been impartial on this issue.
When it comes to final status issues, we believe that those should be negotiated between the parties.
Asked whether he believed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in fact committed to peace, Rhodes sounded a bit skeptical.
At a certain point, the words and the actions become irreconcilable, and that's what we're concerned about.
On today's vote, we got this from Secretary of State John Kerry. Today, the United States acted with one primary objective in mind, to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution. This is not only the last time we're going to hear about this issue. They're going to keep trying to thread the proverbial diplomatic needle on this because the importance of the relationship with Israel is clearly apparent. At the same time, there seems to be a shift in longstanding U.S. policy based on what we saw out of the UN today. Tom?
Thank you, Kevin Corke in Hawaii. Well, joining me now, executive editor for the Weekly Standard, Fred Barnes. And Fred, does this, I mean, over almost 40 years, we have said veto, 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 veto. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, a big change. Does this give President Obama the legacy of being the most anti-Israeli president, maybe more than Jimmy Carter?
Oh, I think he's earned it. Yeah, much more than Jimmy Carter. It's gradually grown, his distaste for Israel, and but it's I mean, this caps it. This change in the vote. Of course, that's going to change when Donald Trump comes in because he's doing the opposite. Because Trump, I think, is right on this issue. The settlements are not the cause. They're not blocking any sort of an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. They're not the problem. I mean, most of these settlements would stay a part of Israel even if there were an agreement. But the Palestinians just will not come to an agreement, and the settlements are not the problem.
Yeah, but I guess the silver lining around this story is that the UN needs a pair of dentures, because I don't think they have any teeth. So seriously, I mean, there's
That's a good way to put it.
And Israel says, so what? We're not even going to pay attention to your comment.
Yeah, well, you know, look, they're going to have to talk, and of course their back channels where they're talking all the time. But this vote in the UN today, I mean, certainly John Kerry and President Obama and Vice President Biden, they must know better. I mean, most of these settlements will stay a part of Israel. I mean, that's just a tiny part of the West Bank, and the Palestinians would get all of that. They've been offered this, half of Jerusalem, and they won't take it. And the deal's not going to get any better than that.
Well, no. And the president has gone to the UN in the past, as you know, and has said, well, what we need to do is go through negotiations. So this is a big change in his policy. The other thing is a lot of people think that President Obama is off in Hawaii having his vacation. And has disappeared, and Donald Trump is kind of running things now. But really, President Obama's been busy. He did get rid of this Muslim registry, which has been around since 9/11.
Yeah, it hadn't been used very much, and I don't think it's going to be an impediment at all to its absence. Its absence is going to be an impediment to Donald Trump. Look, immigration and terrorism are two of his most important issues, and he's going to build immigration rules that are going to be much stronger than anything Obama did, and the ending of this one thing is not going to affect it. I mean, there are going to be a lot fewer immigrants coming in. There are going to be a lot fewer coming from countries that have been exporting terrorists, and I don't think there are going to be any Syrians coming in.
Yeah. Listen, some people are calling it a wannabe bromance, but these letters back and forth between Putin and President-elect Trump, what's your take on all of this? You hopeful?
Well, I don't know. I've got a trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan used to say. And I thought Trump's statement, his one-sentence response, was very interesting. He said, oh, these are very nice thoughts, and we'll see if both sides stick to them or whether they have to take an alternate route. And I think he was saying in that he knows he's going to stick to them, and then he's saying, look, Vladimir, it's up to you.
Good point. Fred Barnes, always good to see you. Merry Christmas, my friend.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, Tom.
Thank you. Well, we have breaking news tonight. The brother of Star Wars actress Carrie Fisher says that she is now in stable condition. This after reportedly suffering a heart attack on a flight between Los Angeles and London and to Los Angeles. The 60-year-old Fisher was rushed to the UCLA Medical Center after the plane landed about noon in California. Paramedics took care of her shortly after the 11-hour flight touched down. Her brother says that she was stabilized this afternoon, originally critical, so that's good news. Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. President Obama, has he embarrassed himself and the left by abstaining from the UN vote condemning Israel? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And follow Lou on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like him on Facebook and follow him on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. It's all there. Meantime, on Wall Street, stocks in the green ahead of the holiday weekend. The Dow climbing 15 points, S&P up 3, NASDAQ up 15. Volume pretty light, 2 billion shares. For the week, the Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ all up less than 1%, but that's a green arrow we keep looking at. Meantime, the FBI, it's now investigating a series of cyber attacks at the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. These go back to 2010. And two sources close to the investigation are telling Fox News that forensic analysis of the hacking suggests it was a Chinese state-sponsored operation. And a reminder, listen to Lou Dobbs' Financial Report 3 times a day, coast to coast. It's on the Salem Radio Network. Words tonight from outgoing Vice President Joe Biden on why his party and Hillary Clinton did not win the White House. Biden, in an exclusive interview with the LA Times, says his party failed to connect with the working class. And on Hillary Clinton herself, Joe Biden said, I don't think she ever really figured it out. She thought she had no choice but to run. That, as the first woman who had an opportunity to win the presidency, I think it was a real burden on her. He also commented about a lot of elitists in the Dem Party. It was pretty brash, what Joe Biden said. If you were dreaming of a white Christmas this season, it depends where you live. You may be out of luck unless you happen to live in the northern plains and the Rockies. Heavy snowfall will take place in parts of the northern plains and Rockies under blizzard-like conditions. Eastern Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, looking very good for a white Christmas. Isn't that where you normally go for snow? Where the East Coasters, though, even my wife, who grew up here on the East Coast, says, it's going to be warm and sunny. Yeah, no snow for the East Coast this year. We're coming well, I don't want to jinx it, probably in January. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. President Donald Trump taking to Twitter to highlight the fact that his son, Eric, will stop directly raising money for his foundation, Eric's foundation. Eric Trump says he's concerned about the perception of buying access to his father, the president-elect, tweeting, my wonderful son, Eric, will no longer be allowed to raise money for children with cancer because of a possible conflict of interest with my presidency. Isn't this a ridiculous shame? He loves these kids, raised millions of dollars for them, and now must stop. Wrong answer. Well, Eric Trump says his foundation has raised more than $15 million for terminally ill children. Joining me now, Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp and Jeff DeWitt, special advisor to the Trump transition team. Mercedes, is this basically bending over backwards so they don't get into a question like the Clinton Foundation and where the money went and the quid pro quo, pay for play, all those things that come up when you start raising money?
Well, I don't think in any way you can compare the atrocities of the Clinton Foundation with what Eric Trump has been dedicating his time and money to, and with the Eric Trump Foundation. I mean, it's very clear that his money is going directly to St. Jude and really has focused on this charitable works for these children with cancer. I don't think you ever saw the Clinton Foundation handling those types of projects. In fact, it's quite different when you actually have the fact that you had not only the Secretary Hillary Clinton's husband as well as a daughter involved in the foundation. They were dealing with foreign governments, many of them who were human rights abusers, which did raise a lot of red flags. I find this to be a very different case, and I think it's very unfortunate that Eric has to step back from doing this very important work to help children with cancer. You
make excellent points. And actually, if you look at the history of presidents and presidential families, they've done a tremendous amount of charitable work. So it's interesting that they're backing off on this one. Jeff, let me get you in on the idea that Donald Trump is tweeting about the fact that we have to fight back after Berlin and watching what's been going on over there. Where's he going to start? How's he going to do this? I got the feeling he doesn't want to give away any plans only for the purpose of basically saying you've got to be secretive about this. Surprise.
Hey, Tom, let me say one thing with Mercedes on the previous topic, is that I can't believe that the same people have a problem with Eric Trump raising money for terminally ill children at St. Jude's Hospital, but they don't have a problem with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State raising money for terminally corrupt politicians who are not saints. And I think it's absolutely horrendous that they're giving him a hard time. Eric Trump does great work, and he needs to keep doing that. But, we need to watch what happens in Europe as a forebearer of what could happen in our country with unfettered immigration. And what you saw in Berlin and what you saw in Nice is the direct result of this open access, open borders, where they're letting all these refugees come in from terrorist countries. And ISIS is infiltrating. ISIS is calling the shots, and they are attacking now the Christian marketplace there, and they're attacking Christians. And we have to keep our neighborhoods safe, our families safe, and our schools safe. And we have to make sure that that does not happen in America.
Mercedes, this we found out yesterday that President Obama, I mean, he's not quietly sitting in Hawaii. He's doing a lot of things, and one of them was to get rid of, tell them to tear up this Muslim registry that has been in place since 9/11, but they haven't used it since 2011. So why didn't he just let a sleeping dog lie instead of going through the process of making sure that it was completely chopped up before he left office?
Well, I think, first of all, Trump is he's a nonstop machine. He just doesn't he's focused on getting his cabinet put into place. He recognizes that he's going to have a window to push forward an aggressive agenda through Congress, which is exactly the type of president that we need right now. I think when you're looking at the fact of ensuring that we have control in terms of our immigration system, that we know who is coming in and out of our country, through knowing who's coming through our borders, ensuring that we have legal immigration in place, and ensuring that individuals don't come into this country from terrorist countries who haven't been properly vetted. I think those are very important steps, considering that President Obama has had a very different position of letting in thousands of Syrian refugees come in with the concern of whether they have been properly vetted or not. I think that's very realistic. I think Jeff brings up a great point, which is the fact that Merkel right now, the prime minister in Germany, is battling the fact that she's dealing with letting in the 1 million migrants that came in and the infiltration of obviously terrorists who have been able to travel from one country to the next.
It'll be interesting to see what the German people do on Election Day for her. Jeff, real quickly, this business about Joe Biden saying that there's a lot of elitism in the Democratic Party and Hillary wasn't a good candidate, essentially. What do you make of that?
I agree. I sound weird saying this. I don't know many things that Joe Biden and I agree on, but we agree on that, in that the Democrat Party has lost touch with what used to be its base, with the hardworking, with the blue-collar men and women of America. And we have picked that up in the Republican Party, and that is all thanks to Donald Trump. And Hillary was not a good candidate. She was a highly, highly flawed candidate, which I'm grateful for. But Donald Trump is very connected to the hardworking men and women of this country and resonates very well with blue-collar workers. Don't forget, he's a construction guy. He built projects. He spent a lot of time with the workers.
Listen,
and he gets it. He just gets it.
He single-handedly has swapped the rap, I guess, about the various parties. But I got to run. Mercedes Schlapp and Jeff DeWitt, both, thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
We're learning more tonight about the terrorists behind Monday's attack in Berlin. The 24-year-old Tunisian refugee, Anis Amri, has been, well, he was on the radar of German authorities for at least 6 months. But according to the Washington Post, German officials tried and failed to deport him after learning that he was plotting a, quote, serious act of violent subversion. They could not get rid of him. Security agencies exchanged information about his alleged ties to ISIS as recently as last month. Amazing. My next guest introduced a bill that would immediately suspend the controversial refugee resettlement program in this country. Joining me now, Congressman Brian Babin, member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Congressman, when I looked at what you're talking about you had a bill back to July of 2015 that's collecting dust somewhere that would do exactly what you want to do now.
That's exactly right, Tom. Great to be with you tonight. I introduced this in July of 2015, just as you said, and that's over almost a year and a half ago. And this was before Paris, before Nice, before Orlando. Just a few attacks, that got it on the radar screen for me and my staff. And I introduced this bill. We have 87 co-sponsors. This bill must hit the floor. We have got to do the things that Donald Trump is saying to do, and that is put a pause, an immediate pause on our refugee program until we can vet these people.
Okay.
But on the contrary...
But Congressman, here's the problem, is I talk to you and your colleagues, and I say, so you're going to get this done like in a week or two or something? And everybody looks at me and says, Congress doesn't work that way. How long would you think this will take to get signed on the president's desk?
Well, it's hard for me to say because one of the big holdups is just the legislative process itself over in the U.S. Senate. They have to have 60 votes to bring something up, and then you can pass it with 51 votes. It's called the filibuster rule. But nevertheless, Donald Trump has made some campaign pledges and promises. And one of them is to stop this refugee program. And I think this bill fits to the T what he is trying to do, and that is to stop the program. President Obama and his administration have thrown caution to the winds constantly. They've dismantled the exit-entry system, which keeps track of foreigners that are coming in from terrorist countries.
Same question. How long does it take to get that back up and running again afterwards?
That may take several months, unfortunately. But with executive orders, the president might be able to do, president-elect might be able to do something a lot more hasty than that. And then we have, the fact of the matter is that President Obama and his administration are bringing in refugees from terrorist countries just as fast as they possibly can, contrary to what the American people want. We do not want these people coming in from terrorist hotbeds. We are absolutely financing and setting these people up in business when they infiltrate in these refugee groups coming into the United States. We're giving them bases of operation at taxpayer expense. It's unbelievable. Well, and we've got to stop it, and I think this is something that the American people have spoken, and they're not going to tolerate anything less than a stoppage of this program. We want to stay safe. This is our first duty when we raise our right hand of swearing our oath of office, and that is to maintain the national security and keep American citizens safe. And that's what our job is, and that's what we'll do.
I wish you much speed, and I like your comment about the fact maybe the president-elect can use an executive order to hasten things along, because you know that his supporters are looking for exactly what you're working on. So we appreciate the fact that you are, and appreciate you coming on tonight. Congressman Brian Babin.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, sir. Well, in our online poll, we asked you, do you agree with President-elect Trump that we need to temporarily suspend Muslim immigration from jihadist countries? 94% of you said yes. Meantime, this is the last year that you and I will be footing the bill for Obama's lavish vacations. Study by the Washington Times finds that Mr. Obama's Christmas vacations in Hawaii have cost taxpayers more than $35 million over the past 8 years. Overall, Mr. Obama has racked up an estimated $85 million in Christmas and all the other vacations that you put together while he is in office. Joining me now, former member of President George W. Bush's senior staff, Brad Blakeman, and Washington Times columnist Tammy Bruce. And Tammy, that's about the amount that you spend on vacation. I know that you're somewhere around 80.
Look, I spend more. I think they're being really frugal. I'm Scottish, so I don't spend anything really at all. But look, the problem with liberals is that they see money as water. And they treat it like water. You turn on a spigot and the taxpayer dollars roll in. This is the other problem with liberal theory in general, is that you've got individuals who believe that they're entitled to something, and that the connection between hard work and the value of a dollar generally is not made. This is with conservative theory, we know that, of course, every individual matters. The money that's in the government belongs to the individuals. We send it in. There's no money tree in the back of the White House. And so we take money seriously. We know the power of money and the value of it, and it's attached to the blood, sweat, and tears of the American people. So it's frustrating. I think that we're certainly not going to see the same thing with President Trump. But when you look at the economy, 95 million Americans out of work, individuals after the recession losing their homes, losing their accounts, their savings accounts. To see this kind of broad-based, wild spending has been, I think, in part really insulting.
Yeah, and Brad, so Donald Trump's already going and talking to Boeing and Carrier and all these other people and saying, cut back, cut back, cut back. Will he actually get these cutbacks? Are they going to cooperate? And does it go beyond just these companies? Are all the boardrooms in corporate America sitting around saying, don't mess with Donald Trump? We better watch what we charge the federal government.
I think it's already working. The fact that, look what he did with Carrier, saving almost 1,000 jobs. Look at the fact that he's called in these CEOs of the military establishment to come in and scold them on the contracts that have already been let out and say that he wants a review of those contracts. And the CEOs come out of the meeting and then they say, we are going to heed Donald Trump's warning. Look, Donald Trump is a bottom line person. He's a deal maker, and he's now going to make deals for the American people as good as he made for himself in business. How can you argue with that? He's not waiting to be sworn in as president to get to work, and already he's getting results.
So, Tammy, there's another part about what's going on with the way that Donald Trump is putting this whole thing together, the business organization, the business model. On one hand, you've got Sean Spicer now, his press secretary, who worked with Reince Priebus, who's his chief of staff. On the other hand, you got Kellyanne Conway now and Steve Bannon. Is he putting together a model of competing forces within his own administration?
I think so. I was very, very happy when I saw that Kellyanne was joining the administration and that his communications team, because for a bit there you saw the RNC bureaucracy kind of moving in. They're almost like perhaps Mr. Priebus and Mr. Spicer were a team in some way. And that wouldn't serve Mr. Trump well. So when you've got the new communications team, you've got really the people that were with him during the campaign itself, separate from the RNC, and Ms. Conway and Mr. Bannon, this means that at least the voice of the people, the voice of that ran a campaign that was not about the bureaucracy and things that, you know, just lumber along. It's going to be a good combination. But for Mr. Trump to be successful, it's going to be the voices of his people that are going to make the difference. The RNC has failed, we know, for almost a generation. They don't get it. They have something to learn from the Trump team, and I'm glad that they're in there.
Brad, what do you make of that? Because you worked in the White House. Is it where one of these teams is going to be the predominant voice, or is it going to, does it work if you have this kind of polarization within the administration where they basically get two extreme different voices?
Look, diversity within the White House is good. And here's why. As long as you're in a meeting and you feel free to speak and exchange ideas, and then when a decision is made, you go lockstep with that decision, knowing full well that you've been heard and heeded, then I think it's great. The problem arises within a White House if the factions start and if you don't feel comfortable airing your views, and then leaking occurs, and then you have some real problems in the organizational and management of the White House. But I happen to think with Donald Trump, as Tammy pointed out, putting a diverse group together of political people, practical people, party people, I think he's on a course to doing a gangbuster job in the White House.
I will leave it there. But Tammy Bruce, Brad Blakeman, both of you, very Merry Christmas to both of you.
Thanks to you. Same to you.
And to this audience, to the Lou Dobbs audience, have a wonderful Merry Christmas and also a Happy Hanukkah to you. And that's all we got for tonight. Good night from New York. Thank you so much for joining us.